Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I was finally able to convince Abhijit Mitra on popular demand to discuss the second part of our show in which we discuss the influence of foreign cuisines on Indian food culture. So today we are going to discuss the diversity within India. Famous biryani of Lucknow, Kolkata, Hyderabad, and what Abhijit calls as biryani from Tamil Nadu, which is actually a pulao. So Abhijit, welcome to the show.
Well. I have appeared on this program in spite of all the malicious canards that you have spread about Tamil cuisine. But anyway.
So let's start with the Tamil Nadu itself. What exactly is the cuisine of Tamil Nadu and how it differs from Kerala?
So very important. This has to do with the oil belts. Tamil Nadu is the sesame oil belt. Kerala is a coconut oil belt. Right. So sesame oil, don't confuse it with Chinese roasted sesame oil. We call it gingerly oil, and it's unroasted sesame, preferably cold pressed. And in Kerala, they would use coconut oil mostly, overwhelmingly. Right. There's other very significant nuances in Tamil cuisine. So all meat, unlike say northern Brahmins who would consider mutton and fish to be sattvic, and in fact in Bengal, it's the higher up the caste ladder you go, the fewer the dietary restrictions. The lower down you go, the more the dietary restrictions. In Tamil Nadu, it's the exact reverse. Tamil Nadu right up to Andhra, it's the exact reverse. The higher up the caste ladder you go, the more the dietary restrictions. No onion, no garlic, no mutton, no fish on top. For some reason, fish is considered the worst of the lot, other than, say, beef, I guess. Right? With the spicing, there's a very specific pattern to the spicing in Tamil Nadu. So in the rest of India, you would use long dalchini and elaichi. That is to say, cardamom, clove, and cinnamon. In South, that is not, in Tamil Nadu, that is not the trifecta. Now, with the homogenization of Indian cuisine that has happened, you see a lot of people use it. But in the South, that initial tadka that you put into everything is in fact sauf, something called patthar ka phool, what we call kalpasi, and dalchini. Okay, so cinnamon, stone flower, and fennel seeds. And sometimes it will be cloves and cinnamon. Okay, you would almost never use cardamom in a Tamil dish. It would almost be exclusively a dessert spice that is used for kheer, or what we call payasam, rice pudding. So there's some very, very distinct markers out there. Then you have the chili belt and the pepper belt. Northern Tamil Nadu into Andhra is the chili belt because that is the more arid area. Right. Southern Tamil Nadu, where even British records show you that you had 3 crops a year, and south, it's the pepper belt. Because pepper would grow in the hills very close to you. And so pepper was much easier available, whereas chili is more of a arid area consumption pattern. If you notice, the 2 areas which consume the most chilies in India are Andhra and Rajasthan, which are extremely arid. So if you notice, Andhra and Rajasthan is where maximum chilies are consumed, as in the cuisine is famous for chilies. And that is your, the arid areas where you need chilies, you need to eat more chilies, so you sweat more and get ventilated more. So, it's that kind of an equation. So you have all these regional variations in Tamil cooking. Then, of course, you have Chettiar cooking. Now, the thing about Chettiar cooking is very curious because most of it is actually imported from Burma and Southeast Asia, because the Chettiars were a trading community, right? So they brought in, so the use of star anise, for example, what you call chakri phool or whatever in Hindi, is very much a Southeast Asian import. Which has become standard in South Indian cooking. It's not too standard. It's much more for Chettinad cooking. And even in Chettinad cooking, to this day, the primary spice remains kalpasi, which is that stone flower or patthar ka phool that we say, which is why, if you look at a YouTube recipe video for Chettinad chicken that does not have kalpasi in it, this bugger doesn't know what he's talking about. It's a fake recipe. There's also, remember, there's a lot of usage of frying spices and herbs, like onion and whole spices together, and then grinding them and use it, which is very unique to South India. And if you look at Tamil Brahmin cuisine, there are lots of unique, and Tamil and Andhra Brahmin cuisine, you can almost club together as a culinary continuum. It's overwhelmingly dry. There's not many dishes where you would pour things over. Maybe rasam, sambar would be the exceptions. Otherwise, it would be semi-dry or completely dry. And it uses dal in many forms. Almost no vegetable will be cooked without a dal in some form or another. Even the tadka will use urad dal, for example. So there was protein incorporated through dals in every part of your diet. Most of your other proteins your animal protein came through curds and yogurt, whatever you want to call it, and things like that. And on religious occasions, you won't use chili. Because remember, chili is an import. You won't even use potato. You will use bananas, yams, pepper, mustard seed fine, but no tomato, no potato, no chilies. And you see the same pattern in Kashmir as well. When on a religious occasion, you won't use tomato and potato. In Bengal as well. So see, there's continuity and there is diversity. So there's many contiguous. So there's a lot about, say, Tamil Brahmin cooking that would be similar to Bengali Hindu cooking or Kashmiri Pandit cooking. And there's a lot of differences as well. So it's a very dynamic interaction on how these things evolve.
Yeah, but that's we're talking about sattvic food. Let's come to the real tamasic food, how it differs from north to south and east to west, let's say mutton, chicken, fish culture and all those things. You make very excellent mutton biryani, Abhijit. You have to now cook it for me again.
Yes. So you'll notice with Tamil Nadu biryani, it's not a spice biryani, it's a herbal biryani, because the overwhelming flavors out there don't come from masala, they come from herbs. So green chili, coriander, and mint. What you call hari mirchi, hara dhania, and hara pudina, right? So it's a very, very herbal biryani. That is what is unique to it. Even there, you have a separation between Hindu biryani and Muslim biryani, because meat is considered so dirty, you won't allow any cow product to touch it. Right? So your Hindu biryani will be cooked without dahi, without yogurt. It will not be cooked in ghee. You will never put ghee in a Hindu biryani. What it does is you take the fat from around the kidney, so the gurde ka fat, you render that. So it's animal fat that you render, and you do the cooking in that. No ghee, no dahi, no milk used in any meat product. Now, of course, it's breaking down, but traditionally you never used it. And it's very similar in that sense to Jewish cooking, because, meat and dairy are never to be mixed. You have to wait for at least 3-4 hours after eating meat to be eating dairy and things like that. It's very similar. The logic here is again quite similar. In Muslim biryani, you will have ghee, and you might have ghee, not necessarily, but you will definitely have dahi put into the biryani out there. With other kinds of meat, what you find is that the meat eating culture is very uniform, other than the dairy part of it. So there's a lot of use of ground coconut in a lot of meats, ground coconut or coconut milk. Coconut milk is much more used in Kerala. In Tamil Nadu, we more use actual ground coconut, the paste of the entire coconut. Occasionally, you'll have, say, cashew or khaskhas or chana jor garam, what we call puttu kadle, that is ground into the coconut to prevent it from splitting, because it acts as a coagulant. So this is very common. And the other things that you'll find about the meat eating culture are that it's always a double cooking process. In the north, what you'll do is you'll fry all the masalas, then you'll fry the meat with it, you'll put the water, you will pressure cook it or cook it, and at most you will add, say, fried onions on top at the end, or like make a birista and then cook it with the fried onion. In Tamil and Andhra cooking, it's completely different. You make the stock, you boil the mutton or chicken separately. You use that stock to make a biryani or whatever. And it is the boiled mutton or roasted or whatever that is then fried or roasted or whatever with a different set of spices. So there's always a double cooking involved, or you cook it in a broth and then you stir fry it with that broth later on. So it's a very unique double cooking method that we use in Tamil Nadu that is very common in Tamil Nadu. In fact, there is not a single Tamil meat dish, dry meat dish, that isn't double cooked. And double cooking is very important because, they say na dal ka jaan tadka mein hota hai. That the life of the dal is in the tadka you put at the end. Think about it technically. Why do you put a tadka in? Because it adds a layer of fresh spice or herb to it. It's much more vibrant on your palate. And so this last spicing is to bring that vibrance because, it becomes long cooking makes it a lot more mellow. On the other hand, you look at the vegetable culture. Vegetable culture is, remember, and this was across India, rich people used to cook their vegetables a lot because it required a lot of energy. It was a show of wealth if you cooked your vegetables a lot. But in the olden days, you did have to cook your vegetables a lot because you had your fertilizers was human and organic manure. So, there was always the risk of infection. So you had to cook it, sterilize it. In Tamil Nadu and things, what you did was you mostly steamed your vegetables. Most of the heat was reserved for the carbohydrate that you're cooking, rice mostly. And on top of that, you would steam your vegetables and then you would quickly stir fry them. And so unlike, in a lot of places in the north, it used to happen. It doesn't happen anymore. Vegetables had this great crunch. They were like, because steam is much more efficacious in cooking than water. Steam, if you put your hand over boiling water, you're not going to burn. But if you put your hand over steam, it will burn very, very badly. Well, it'll burn over boiling water if you're close enough. But steam, it doesn't matter how high you are, the steam is going to burn you, right? So steam cooking used to lock in all the nutrients while neutralizing all the harmful bacteria. So that was one way of keeping vegetables really fresh, which was very different from other places.
Yeah, but let's say come to the northeast. We are stopping in Bengal. So you have Assam, Nagaland, Manipur. What about them? I mean, they have very delicious foods.
Yes, they have amazing food. And there, it's particularly curious because, again, you see the same continuity and diversity. The first thing is the oil that they use there is overwhelmingly mustard oil. So it's part of the mustard oil belt. And you know that no other country in Asia uses mustard oil other than India. Well, maybe Pakistan. There's the mustard oil belt there. But everything they use is extremely herbal. It's not spice driven, it's herb driven. It's also very simple food in that it's just cooked over with a lot of herbs and spices on a wood flame. Unlike, say, Tamil Brahmin food, it's overwhelmingly wet food. It's not very dry food, right? And the other thing is the abundance of chili. So I was reading a very, very curious article because we know that chilies originate in the Americas, in the Aztec areas of southern Mexico. But apparently the diversity, and usually the point of origin is where the greatest diversity, the genetic diversity of crop exists. But apparently in the Northeast, you have almost equivalent genetic diversity of the chili to its origins in America. So that's something quite interesting you find out there, but it's a much fresher palate. You'll find that the use of oil, one of the things about what we call mainland Indian cooking is probably too much oil. In the Northeast, you will have almost no oil used.
Yeah.
I think the only real fat, you use the oil for flavor every now and then. The mustard oil is more of a condiment, really. But the fat comes out of pork. And that's the only really fatty dish that they have. In other things, they will cook it without any oil at all.
Wow, but what about the food in Rajasthan and Gujarat? So they have a very strong vegetarian culture, Haryana, Rajasthan, and Gujarat belt. But it's a very rich food. You actually love eating the vegetarian food from these regions, right? And especially the trading communities from these regions. They have a very rich, very rich food culture. What about them?
So that is a function of trade. They've always been very high trade communities or very hierarchical communities. So you look at Rajasthan, extremely hierarchical, where spices became. So in the olden days, you couldn't go buy a Lamborghini or a Ferrari to show off that you've come. You couldn't build something like Antilla to say, "Janta hai mera baap kaun hai." What you did instead was you ate more times a day and you used lots of spices in your food. This was one aspect of the kind of spicing. The second aspect to it was the kind of diversity you see in local cuisine. You see things like Kher Sangri, which is essentially a desert bean and a desert berry. It's one of my favorite foods in Rajasthan. If you haven't been, it's definitely something you should try. There's a lot of dahi used in the cooking because dahi was something you desperately needed to cool you down out there in the heat. At the same time, you also need to sweat more, so increase in chilies. In Gujarat, the joke about sugar. Why was sugar used? Because water was so precious, you only drank fresh water. Everything else was done in salt water. And to counteract the salt water in your food, you need to equalize it, so you added sugar to it. Now, people have forgotten why sugar was added, but that's why sugar was added, which is why modern Gujarati food, you don't add that much sugar to it. It's not, you can't make out the difference between the caramel custard and the mutton curry because there's so much. That was the joke, right?
I've never seen that mutton curry.
I'm just making a joke, but the thing was, it's no, you do have a Gujarati culture of non-vegetarian food as well. Remember, Parsi food started off in Gujarat. It's today associated with Bombay, but it was mostly a Gujarati thing. Navsar, Valsad, and all those places like that. So they've had a lot of intermixture. In fact, the sweet and sour aspect, you can almost say that it's a Persian import, a Zoroastrian import, because even today, if you go to Iran, you see the proportion of Iranian foods where they value sourness is extremely high. I think the one characteristic trademark of Iranian food is how much khatta they like.
Okay.
Not tikha, not spicy khatta. Okay. And you see this a lot in Parsi cooking, though they did the sweet and salt. And you see the genesis of the sweet and sugar thing in this Gujarati habit of putting sugar into things to neutralize the salt. So you have this very complex picture that happens with this kind of food. And then, of course, you have the royal cuisine. So what we like is jangli mas, lal mas, safed mas.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that had to do with the fact it was pure energy consumption, because when you're doing battle and things like that, you need to do several things. One is you need to cool down, so there has to be dahi in it. On the other hand, you also need to heat up so that your body sweats and you don't suffer a heat stroke, as in there's ventilation happening. And you need a lot of energy, which comes from the ghee. So these are, it's a very, each famous dish that you see coming out of that desert belt generally has a very specific history to it. In every other culture, they always say food brings people together. It's where you all sit and celebrate joy. The diversity of Indian cuisine is actually because of caste and chronic separation of everything. It is a food of division. It's a celebration of division. It's not a celebration of unity. It's a celebration of division.
It's unity in diversity. So
yes.
But let's come down to Maharashtra.
Or rather, deliciousness in diversity. Yes.
Deliciousness in diversity. So you come down to Maharashtra and Goa and also Karnataka. How the food changes and how it differs, and what are the best foods in these regions?
So I've never particularly liked Konkan food, right? For the primary reason that I've never been able to pinpoint their origins entirely. I think the problem with the food of that region, northern Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Goa, has been the fact that there have been so many influences. It's become like the English language. You never know where anything originates. There's no proper grammatical rules. Like Italian and French will have strict grammar rules. You don't have those in English, right? Because it's half of it is borrowed from the Romance languages, half is borrowed from the Germanic languages, and then something else from some other languages and things like that. It doesn't work. So you find there's a lot of copra being used, dry coconut in the food of that region. There's a lot of coconut also used. But the very surprising thing about that belt is probably the excess use of garam masala. To the extent that in Karnataka, they will put garam masala in their sambar. Okay, in Udupi, for example, the sambar will have the sambar and the rasam will have a little bit of cinnamon in it. You will never use garam masala in, say, Tamil or Andhra Brahmin cooking. They're seen as non-veg spices. Even saunf, because I told you, remember, saunf is the primary non-veg spice in Tamil Nadu and parts of Andhra. Even saunf will not be used in a Brahmin house. The moment you put saunf, they'll say, "Isme non-veg ka boo aa raha hai." Yeah, they'll say it smells like non-veg. If you put dalchini, long, elaichi in something, they'll say, "Isme non-veg ka boo aa raha hai." But here you find in this particular belt, there's a lot of garam masala used and there's a lot of coconut used. But the cooking techniques, they're not these like the double cooking technique here. Or you can even say that, in Lucknow, UP, the adding of birista, that is to say fried onion, brown fried onion paste at the end, is kind of a double cooking technique. You don't find that much in Maharashtra or northern Karnataka. So there's a significant difference out there. And one of the reasons I find it irritating is because I've never been able to pinpoint the origins. Because sambar, remember, was brought in by the Marathas into Tamil Nadu. And I would say that it's retained the authenticity much better than what you get in Karnataka and Maharashtra, simply because, it's the same reason that Russian Orthodox Christianity remained unchanged, whereas Greek Orthodox Christianity mutated a lot. Because the Russians went on going back to, the original Ram Rajya, Rashidun Caliphate kind of idea, original maintain karna hai, original. They were really scared of any kind of modification and things like that. So that's how they played out.
But what about Karnataka? Karnataka also has a very rich food culture. The northern Karnataka, of course, is a continuum because you have the Maharashtra and other influence. But what about the southern and the central Karnataka?
So southern Karnataka, I think the main things that you look at in Karnataka are more to do with that Udupi food, specifically with the dosas. Right? Then nobody makes dosas the way you get in Bangalore. Say CRT or Vidyarthi Bhavan would be the best dosas around there. Okay, but you look even in their upma, for example, they call it what? Masala bhat? No idea. I forget what they call it, but they've got a masala upma. Even in that, they put garam masala. So, generally as a rule, Tamils going there, they find it very difficult, especially Tambrams. When they go there, they're like, "Ye kya har cheez mein garam masala dal dete ho?" I can tell you personally, I can't stand their rasam or their sambar. First, there's sugar in it. Then they put something called Marathi mogu in it. And then they put dalchini in it, which is very, very irritating.
Now you are cancelled from Karnataka.
I'm unfortunately cancelled by Karnataka, yes. But generally, even Karnataka is part of that Andhra, Tamil Nadu continuum. Right? So think of it as a triangle. The issue is that there's been a significant alteration of that Karnataka part of that. I suspect because of the Mysore kingdom and things like that. But I've never actually been able to trace it.
But let's come to central India, the great UP, and then you enter into Bihar.
There's UP and there's great. You can't combine that.
Were you able to make champaran mutton, the recipe which I sent you?
I actually got a better recipe from somebody else. So champaran mutton was very good. It's a bit overspiced for my taste, and I really don't know what's unique about it. It's a good mutton, But I'm constantly searching for things that are unique. So for example, for me, a Champaran mutton isn't as unique as an Awadhi Zafrani biryani. Okay, because the Awadhi Zafrani biryani is only about the chicken and the saffron and nothing else. And the rice, because in a biryani, the rice is the star. People think the meat is the star. It's not. The meat is just, you can actually throw the meat away. You won't be any, because the meat is essentially a condiment for the rice. The rice is the star of the show. And the rice needs to be impregnated with the flavor of chicken and saffron. And I discovered very curiously that the technique that is meant to be followed for it is just like, you remember I told you about the Tamil Nadu Hindu biryani, which uses animal fat to cook. Here it's meant to be chicken fat that's meant to be used. That's what gives the rice the flavor. So it's chicken fat and the saffron that give it the flavor. It's technically a pulao, but whatever it is, it's just fantastic. Mm-hmm. But it's some of those dishes that are much more interesting, as well as you look at Chaturvedi cuisine. So, which is no onion, no garlic. And it's brilliant because they actually do use a lot of garam masala. So I don't know where Chaturvedi food gets it right, where the Maharashtra, Karnataka belt do not. Because see, they also put garam masala in a lot of what they do, but it seems completely misplaced. In UP, it does not. So, you go street side eating in Varanasi or Lucknow and things like that. It's delicious. Like tomato ka chaat is really delicious, right? You look at all those kachori, khasta kachori and sabzi, aloo ki sabzi and things like that on the road. They'll put garam masala there, but it's delicious. It works, right? So they're obviously doing something right out there. I think there's a great Awadhi cuisine. I think the problem is if you stick to the original recipes, they're very good. They've been overspiced because the Indian palate is so completely destroyed by too much spice. Like I had a house guest staying with me for the last 2 weeks, and with them, you can cook exquisite stuff, but they can't eat it. UP wala can't eat it without kacha pyaz, so raw onions, at least 2-3 different kinds of pickle, and dahi ka raita. And I'm sitting there looking, saying, I made such a fantastic dish for you. Why are you destroying it? It's like going to a French restaurant and ordering ketchup with your steak. Who the hell does that?
I can imagine the expression on your face, like what barbarian.
I mean, it's an insult. It's an insult. It's an insult to the chef, right? But you find that is also there a lot in UP, because what's happening is that where the food is actually authentic is dying down. We don't consider food culture. We don't preserve it. We don't document it, right? And there is this thing that somehow this guy would have hit on gold, but people around will come and say, yaar, isme chatpata nahi hai, maza nahi aa raha hai, tikha nahi hai, masala nahi hai. So then he will start putting lots of chilies in it and lots of garam masala in it to up the spice quotient, and you've destroyed it.
But Abhijit, we have this very famous saying, agar main galat nahi bol raha hu, Shubho Banaras, Shame Awadh or Shame Malwa. Malwa food culture, Indore and all that reason, the evening culture of snacks and other thing. What do you have to say about that?
But that's what I was talking about, the roadside vegetarian food. I don't have a very high opinion of a lot of their non-vegetarian food. So for example, people go gaga over, say, Galauti kebabs or their general kebabs in Lucknow and things. I really don't think very highly of them. Because see, just because you spice it up doesn't make it good. Spice is not good. Spice can be good, but ham-handed use of spices is not good. Again, you will get much better mutton bara kebabs in Old Delhi than you will in Lucknow, Indore, and all those places. So I'm yet to see, especially say South Malwa region, I'm yet to see a particularly great dish. I know in the YouTube comments when we put this up, they'll say, but you haven't tried this. But you haven't tried that. I've actually tried most of it. The problem is it didn't sing on my palate the way certain other things did. So, for example, you remember when I took you, Abhinav, to a restaurant called Handi in Jaipur.
Yeah.
And we had something called a jungli mas out there. And they're the only ones that know how to do it in Jaipur, incidentally. All the other jungli mas you've had in Rajasthan is rubbish. There is only Handi that does it properly. It is just rock salt, ghee, mutton, and chili. And you can't imagine how amazing it is when you eat it.
Yeah.
It's like an epiphany. Okay, it's like Buddha appears in your dreams and the angels are singing and light is shining through from the heavens and things like that. When you have a proper chicken chettinad, not the crap you get in Delhi or Bangalore. Even in Bangalore, you don't get good proper chicken chettinad. Most of the recipes you see are a complete rubbish. You don't get it. But when you have it proper, it's an epiphany. So there's a lot of things about Indore. The amazing thing is the Zafrani pulao recipe that I have was given to my mother by somebody from Awadh. She's got the name written down, but that got rubbed off by some water damage in her diary. So she forgets now who gave her that recipe. It had literally nothing in it. Not even chilies. It was just chicken, rice, saffron, ginger, garlic, and that's about it. Right? And it is amazing.
Yeah. Final comments on the cuisine from Punjab. Because Punjabi food in Delhi, it has become chola bhatura and whatnot. But what about the authentic Punjabi food? Because that's also very tasty.
Authentic Punjabi food is amazing. So I remember this sarson ka saag. Today, the sarson ka saag you eat in a restaurant is rubbish. Because it's not sarson ka saag, उन्होंने बस नाम के वास्ते उधर सरसों का साग डाल के रखा है. It's mostly palak and bathua that they've mixed into it, and they claim it is sarson ka saag. When you eat sarson ka saag, you should get that pungency of the mustard. And if you add other things to it like spinach, you are not going to get that. The proper sarson ka saag, you cook with a little bit of chana dal, a whole shalgam, and green chilies, and nothing else. You pressure cook it, then you grind it. Well, that lady that I learned it from did not grind it, but you grind it up. And then in the tadka, you put in mustard oil, you put onion, garlic, jeera. That's it. Okay. Butter, of course. Today, they put that normal onion, ginger, garlic, tomato gravy. Then they add palak to it. And I'm like, dude, you've just got a green butter chicken. Why do you even call it sarson ka saag?
Green butter chicken.
I mean, that's what it is. I mean, you tell me the last time you had a sarson ka saag that was so much fun that the heat actually went up your nose and started tingling. That is the fun of sarson ka saag. So authentic Punjabi food was incredible. Modern Punjabi food is absolute rubbish because it's lost, like across India. It's lost its nutrition value. It's lost its flavor. You saw that graph I tweeted about a week or two back.
Yeah.
100 years, from 1920 to 2020, even organic vegetables have lost 98% of their mineral and vitamin content. Which means even an organic vegetable that you're eating today has only 2% of the nutrition and nourishment it had 100 years back. So you are substituting masala. So here's the thing. People in India, we think masala is a substitute for flavor. Masala is a substitute for technique. And that is what you're seeing. And this is where Punjabi food has become so bad today. The original tandoori chicken, for example. Today they'll say first marination karo with salt and pepper. Tell me somebody poor guy coming from partition Punjab. You think he could afford a refrigerator and then do first marination, second marination, third marination, 254th marination? It was desi chicken. Remember, with desi chicken, it was very tough. How did you soften it? You just added dahi, sarson ka tel, garam masala and lal mirchi and left it out there in the boiling heat. The dahi would prevent the chicken from deteriorating and it would soften it. It would, between the heat and the lactic acid from the dahi, it would soften up the chicken so that, and in those days, remember. So when it went into the tandoor, it was, you didn't have time to put lemon juice, this juice, that juice, Ratan Jot ka powder to color it red, and some idiot wants to put badam kishmish into it. The kind of crap you see is just ridiculous. You don't put all this nonsense. It's just plain, simple, direct 4 ingredients. Bas, that is your tandoori chicken. Today with broiler chicken, you have to keep it because you're afraid of chicken botulism and things like that. You keep, or salmonella. You keep it in the fridge for 72 hours for that same lactic process to happen. But it's the only 5. Adrak lasan ka paste, dahi, mustard oil, Kashmiri red chili, and garam masala. Bas. Nothing else. No bloody lime juice. Okay. No bloody kasuri methi. No bloody nothing. But they don't get it.
Yeah. But that's the same story with the Punjabi songs. The old Punjabi songs, they were so beautiful. And now you see the Punjabi.
You listen to Heer Ranja. Heer Ranja is a beautiful this thing. Well, what do you want to call it?
But Abhijit,
opera?
It was a wonderful discussion, extremely good discussion. Perhaps what we can do, instead of meme reviews, we should be having a recipe review.
Yes, I think we should. We should do recipe
Your
reviews.
expert comments on the recipes. That's fun. But thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please subscribe to the channel and join as a member to support the channel. I will get Abhijit someday to answer your questions on the same topic. Then perhaps you can grill him. Tune ye nahi khaya hai, wo nahi khaya hai. But Abhijit, thanks a lot for your time as well.
Well, very well.
Thank you. And thank you, audience.